Hello students, welcome. Welcome to English literature class. See, 20th century English literature had its remarkable history, which is a content for English honor students. Here we will focus much on a man, a time, a literature. A man, T.s.Eliot. A time, 20th century, a literature, English literature. In 20th century, we marked a revolutionary change in the poetic taste, activity, writing style, and thoughts. And among all the famous poets of this time, T.s. Eliot cannot be forgotten. And he is one who shocked the world in 1940 for the Nobel Prize he won for literature. And T.s. Eliot is one of the most remarkable English poet of this century, means 20th century. He had great influence on poetry for more than 40 years, and he sees poetry and ceremony as forces that can give meaning to the emptiness and confusion of modern world. He gives great importance to the forces that make it possible for the spiritual as well as physical life to continue. Okay, let us discuss in details about him and his writing. We remember T.s. Eliot, right, as a great poet, as a critic, and also as a poetic drama writer. And among his famous writings, Love Song of Alfred Prufrock and The West Land are very famous, right? Oh, let us see. This man, T.s. Eliot, right, dominated the English literature of 20th century for around 4 decades, means 40 years. He was born in 1888 in USA, then he was shifted to England, and then he made his career in English literature and won the Nobel Prize also. We have seen this, his literary achievements. Now, he speaks of English letters with the voice of authority. In fact, there had been no one who occupied a comparable position since the reign of Samuel Johnson. T.s. Eliot burst upon the Georgian literary scene with a bang. Of course, there were other poets of this period whom can be noted parallel with T.s. Eliot. They were Dawson, Oscar Wilde, and many others. But these poets turn for their theme to the music hall and to the experience of drug addict and to the fantasy of every conceivable vice. But T.s. Eliot focused on other aspects such as the power to express the boredom, the horror, and the glory of contemporary world. And he has much focused on the socio-economic conditions of the contemporary society. Particularly, his poem, The Wasteland, the most significant work of the period, which goes beyond the diagnosis of the spiritual distemper of the age. And it is a lament over man's fallen nature, a prophecy and a promise. T.s. Eliot suggests that our civilization is the wasteland. Yeah. Oh, we can attain youth and life-giving rains only by passing far and learning a hard lesson, such as self surrender, sympathy, self control, are the way of salvation. In his spiritual explanation, he presented it. The similar view also presented by him in the Hello Man in 1925. So he said that our civilization is a dying civilization. When we talk about, Ash Wednesday 1930, he has written that shows a poetic movement towards the recovery and turning towards life and some optimism. This poem records in six movements the spiritual experience of the great renunciation, and it also directs the will in four quartets in 1944, which was published. The four poems in the works have appeared separately, right? They are, one, the Bond Norton, published in 1936, East Kosher, published in 1940, The Dry Slavages, published in 1941, and Little Gidding, published in 1942. T.s. Eliot here expresses his mystical faith and the essential attitude that merge from the four quartet I have now studied, told you that four names, that behind the procession of appearance moving between the birth and death is aware of spiritual reality. He spoke much about the spiritual, reality, and his awareness imposes its mortality subject to death. Okay, and he said the right action, which is freedom from past to future, it indicates spiritual evaluation of the poet from despair. Despair means a state of hopelessness and skepticism to hope and religious faith. Let us discuss the techniques used by T.s.Eliot in his poetry. Now, many says that he brought a revolutionary change in the technique of English poetry in 20th century, and his technique can be noted as symbolistic. And the chief elements which he used were a private association of thought, vague and fugative music, linking of images, and association by thought, and naturalism. And the most focusing point is irony he has used in his poetry. Irony and detachment going together is his classical presentation in the poems of 20th century. So T.s. Eliot is much praised for such type of techniques he has applied in his English verses. Let us discuss T.s. Eliot as a critic. He has provided new theories of poetry and criticism. He is a classicist and plead for the impersonality of art. He describes the process of poetic creation as a continual self-sacrifice and continual extinction of personality. What he says is that poetry is not a turning loose of emotions but an escape from emotion. See, poetry is not a turning loose of emotion but an escape from emotion. It is not the expression of personality but an escape from personality. Such art of impersonal conception is called anti romantic, and here attention is not upon the poet but upon the poetry is much focused. For Eliot, the essence of poetry is metaphor, and he has been influenced by the French symbolists of 19th century and the metaphysical poets of 17th century. His prose works includes The Sacred Wood of 1920, which is a collection of essays, and his main concern is literary criticism. As a critic, his main focus is literary criticism. Though the idea of Christian society is a significant indication of the direction of his development, his criticisms are contained in different books. See some of the books I am telling you now. For example, the selected essay of 1932, the use of poetry and the use of criticism, Elizabethan essays, strange gods, and so on like this. Now let us revive T.s. Eliot as a passion, how he used the dramatic forms in English literature. Eliot remained as an outstanding writer who tried to revive the poetic drama as a reaction against the prose drama. Right? First of all, he turned his attention to the dramatic form with the rock in 1934, and Eliot has used the Greek form in his presentation, which promised the development of dramatic power, but it is stiff in the movement in his expressions. There are many writings here where he used Greek dramatic form. For example, you take the case of the murder in the cathedral 1935, the family reunion 1939, the cocktail party in 1949. He tried to adapt the domestic scene to the Greek dramatic form. He maintained that poetry should be the medium of drama. According to him, poetry should be the medium of drama. Prose drama is superficial, what he says, and external also. To sum up the overall concepts we have studied so far, T.s. Eliot has been the most influential critics and poet of present century, that is the 20th century. According to G.S. Fraser, T.s. Eliot had a number of suggestive ideas, and the ideas which often compressed into a single phrase, and the phrase he used are fertilized thinking of other critics. So this person has high wit of presenting things, and his views regarding the tradition versus the individual talent and poetic drama, and also impersonality in poetry, the disassociation of sensibility, and 100 other themes and problems have to be taken cognizance of by every literary commentator. Yes, much of T.s. Eliot's literary criticism is indeed an extension of his poetry workshop, and it deals with the issues relating to contemporary society and some physical and spiritual concepts of the time. Uh, Overall, we can say that T.s. Eliot can always be praised for his technique of writing poetry and for his critique critical analysis of others' writings, and many other remarkable qualities he did possess. Okay, thank you very much, students. Thank you.